Hey everybody, I'm Nick Layton.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
If your restaurant wants to put the best on the table, look for food with the New York State Certified Seal. It's food that is grown right here. Learn more at certified.ny.gov.
Good morning, Heritage Radio listeners. My name is Eli Sussman. I'm the chef and owner of Samisa Restaurant, and this is The Line. It's 11 a.m., and we are coming to you live from the studio. We've got Jake Novick-Finder here with us. He is the chef and owner of Gristmill, located in Park Slope. Previously, he was part of the Union Square Hospitality Group. He has worked at Chanterelle. He worked in Boston, and he is going to tell us all about how he ended up having his own restaurant in Park Slope. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eli. Excited to be here.
So let's start off. Why is the restaurant called Gristmill? How did you come up with that name?
So we were trying to find a name that really kind of exemplified what we were trying to do with farm to table. We didn't want kind of the, for lack of a better word, marketing BS of farm to table where you just buy tomatoes twice a year from New Jersey. We wanted to say that this restaurant is about merging the Hudson Valley, merging small farms, small purveyors with a small community restaurant, with wood-fired food, with tasting fire. So the idea was to talk about how important fresh mill flour is to me. My background as a pastry chef and bread baker, there's nothing more important than flour. And because of that, I felt like if I kind of show the example of how important fresh mill flour is from the bottom of my dough, then it kind of becomes this, of course, everything else I get from flour up to the top of the pizza to every plate I do is fresh milled, fresh farm. And so gristmill is where grain is milled into flour. And we thought, hey, what a perfect example of what we're doing.
So tell me about flour. What kind of flour do you use at the restaurant? How do you, as a someone with a background in baking and pastry, now you oversee all the savory and the sweet side of things. How do you make those decisions about flour, sourcing, flour combinations for your pizza dough?
Yeah, so I mean, everything at the restaurant is about sourcing. I try to take sourcing food just as seriously as cooking food. And I probably spend almost as much time sourcing as I do cooking. It's something I kind of fell in love with working in Boston, getting to do a lot of the sourcing and receiving and ordering for the restaurant. And at Gristmill, I'm overseeing savory and sweet, and I'm trying to work grain into savory and sweet. We're working with 4 small grain farms, and that's all of our grain products, from oats to flours. The main flour farm we work with is one I've been working with for many years now in the Berkshires, called 4 Star Farms. One of my favorite flour farms in the country. And they mill to order. So they text me on Mondays, mill Monday night and Tuesday, and deliver it to me on Thursday, which is quite fresh.
For those listening that are not really familiar with the process, can you just speak a little bit about, so people know that AP flour, it's white, it ends up in a bag on the shelf. I think beyond that, people that don't do a lot of baking, that haven't really made anything besides cupcakes or maybe a cake here and there, they're not really understanding the entire process. Can you give us a little bit of background about what the milling process is and how does it start in the field, and then what happens when it ends up at your restaurant at a place like 4 Star?
Absolutely. So with 4-Star, with Wild Hive, with all the grain farms we work with, they grow or buy grains that are grown in the field. We work with a lot of different grains. I think I have maybe 13 different grains in my office where I keep them temperature controlled. It's everything from triticale, which is one of my favorite grains, a splice between whole wheat and rye, to more whole wheat grains, more rye grains. So all these grains are grown in the field. Some are cover crops, meaning they're grown to add nutrients to the soil. And then when the grains are cut down, when they're taken, and I actually, unfortunately, have not been able to visit 4-Star farms yet. Can't wait to go. But hard to leave the restaurant. But the grains are taken in once they've been grown, and they are milled in large grain mills, also called a gristmill, where they're broken down into flour. When they're broken down into flour, there's lots of different parts of the grain. There's kind of on a bigger picture level, there's fibers, there's nutrients, there's kind of the endosperm part of the grain where you're going to have all these particles that you wouldn't see in white flour, partly because white flour is bleached and we don't work with any bleach products, partly because all of the germ is sifted out. When you sift all the germ out and you have no germ flour, you have a product that's potentially a little more shelf stable and a little easier to work with, a little more all-purpose, if you will, but it also lacks a lot of the nutrients, a lot of the flavor. So we buy kind of a mixture of different flours. We buy one flour that's no germ for a very specific purpose from Champlain Valley Milling. But all the 4-Star grains, we have two choices: bolted, which is where they sift out some of the germ, or whole grain, where they leave all of the germ in, and you get a much coarser flour. It's a little less even to work with and a little trickier when you're working with fresh mill flour. But basically, when they're milling the grain, they're breaking it down to different coarse levels, and then they're sifting it to different levels. So you get different amounts of the nutrients and fiber in there. So we work with flours that are both, and we mix a lot in house. So for my pizza dough, for example, I'm using majority is spelt flour from 4-Star Farms. I'm also using Warthog, which is another kind of bread whole wheat grain flour from 4-Star Farms, and both of those are bolted, meaning some of the germ has been removed, but not all. And then I use high extraction from Farmer Ground Flour, which is a half wheat, half white extraction flour. That's the combination of mixing each of our doughs, each of our breads. They all are custom blends that we do in-house.
You just dropped a lot of knowledge on us, and that's amazing that you have this breadth of just deep understanding of where you're sourcing from to draw on to make your decisions for the menu. How much of your knowledge about this is self-taught, and how much of it is informed by the years that you spent in other restaurants? Do you feel like you got a master's when you were doing pastry, or are you still every single weekday reading and learning about these grains and experimenting how to work with them?
I would say it's both. I got a really strong master's or a fundamental lesson in every kitchen that I've ever worked in. And some more than others, of course. The bread bakery I worked at, I learned a lot about dough development. Friends that kind of specialize in dough, we still stay in touch and text random facts. But everywhere I worked, we used anywhere from gold medal to King Arthur to any of the more store-bought flours. Even the best restaurants in the city that I worked at, I was working at, I started in kitchens when I was pretty young. So I started in kitchens, 14 years ago. And, even 8 years ago, no one was caring about where flour came from, or at least they weren't focusing on it. It was other things to focus on. So flour was all white flour. So this whole fresh mill flour, that's something that I'm constantly experimenting, constantly playing with. It's totally new. I mean, everywhere I worked, we use instant yeast. I won't touch instant yeast at Gristmill. Everything is sourdough starter. Maybe one day we'll use some kind of other yeast, but right now everything comes from my sourdough starter named Daisy, and Daisy's the person who taught me the most about bread at Clear Flour Bakery.
Oh, it's named after someone's real.
Oh yeah,
specific,
very
cool.
Specific. So Daisy's a close friend. She was the head baker at Clear Flour. She's no longer there, but Clear Flour is where I spent a year learning a ton about dough and bread development, and Daisy and I stay in touch, and I'm still trying to convince her to move to Brooklyn.
It's amazing that when we're close in age, and when we were kids, you'd go out to dinner and you'd get a bread basket on the table, but it was crap. It was a total afterthought. It was like that French bread that's like air in the middle and then it has a hard crust on the outside, right? You get a couple slices, there's some cold butter. Now you see bread being centerpieces of menus. Obviously, pizza is a very huge thing in Brooklyn, but all over the United States. Pizza has had a resurgence in the last 7 years as being something that people are taking very seriously, not only as just like a slice joint, but being a focal point of the menu. And now you hear tons of people talking about bread formulation and making their own starters. How did it come about, do you think, that there was such a large change? You just mentioned that even a couple years ago, no one had ever heard of, Sir Galahad. Like there were all these great flours that are coming into play, and you're sourcing 13 varieties right now. When do you think this change happened, and why did it come about that people are paying such close attention to bread now?
So I think that it kind of started with a renaissance maybe, 7 to 10 years ago of bread being important again. I almost want to say that like France, that's considered kind of our leader in bread, at least on a global perspective, went into the wrong direction. They started to do mass-produced bread, and they started to just send out frozen dough all over the city, and they did it really well. I mean, if you go to Paris and you get a baguette, chances are it's going to taste the same as the one at the next corner because it's made in the same factory. But for a frozen dough, it's really impressive. It's still going to blow people away. I think in the U.S., they started in the wrong direction of having frozen dough that didn't taste good, where everyone thought, oh, man, Americans can't make bread. But it opened up an opportunity for a renaissance, Bread Bakers Guild of America and different associations to have bakeries across the country. If you look at some of the top baguette lists in the United States, you'll see some amazing bread bakers that have said, wait a minute, there's something really fucking cool we can do with flour, water, yeast, and salt. And I think that kind of movement pushed people into, okay, well, we can't charge $12 a loaf quite yet for bread, so we still have to use white flour or cheap flour. But then as people started to go, oh, wow, yeah, I'll pay $8 for that loaf. Like, that's a real delicious piece of bread. I had no idea something with just flour, water, yeast, and salt could mix together and taste so good. That people started to go, wait a minute, what happens if we keep the germ in? What happens if we take a few steps back and stop bleaching flour? What happens if we go back to everything being truly farm to table, even our flour? And I want to say in the last, 5 years, a lot of the credit goes to Dan Barber, who has really kind of spoken up and is such a figure in the food movement to say, wait a minute, if we grow grain, we can control every step of it in-house. And the yeast is in the air. So if we're just kind of pulling wild yeast from the environment and mixing it with just this grain that grows, I mean, to me, there's nothing more beautiful than something so incredibly simple. There's nothing more beautiful than having just the fewest possible ingredients, but knowing that every time you make it, the flavor is going to be slightly different, and every time that you work with it slightly different, it's the flavor. So it takes away I can mix 15,000 ingredients together and make a really sexy dish for you, and goes back to the challenge of all of it being technique. If you have just 3 ingredients, it's all technique, and I think that's really what pushes people who are bored of old school cooking with too many ingredients to say, I want to make the most basic thing, but I want to blow your mind.
I want to talk about 12-year-old Jake. When I was 12, I think that I was maybe still like playing with action figures. I was definitely not focusing on a career choice. You were about to start working in a kitchen at 12 years old. What kitchen was it? And I also want to know, was there a negotiation process with your parents about doing this? And if yes, how did you convince them? And if not, why did your parents think that this was going to be a good idea for you to start sort of an externship at 12 years old at a restaurant? It seems a bit insane to let a kid loose in a New York City kitchen.
Well, I think, after my parents, raised me and saw me go through the last, 14 years of kitchens, their decision would be way different if they had another kid decide to do this now. So, yeah, they definitely were a little crazy 14 years ago. There was actually no negotiation that I remember. They were incredibly supportive. A close family friend who became kind of a mentor of mine, he taught young kids and really was inspired by kids with passion. And he said to me at 12 years old, he was like, what do you want to do in life? And I took that question very seriously, maybe too seriously. And I said, I want to cook. And he was like, well, what do you cook? And I was like, I make fruit salad. I make a Duncan Hines, like, brownie mix. Like, I'm totally mastered every cake mix there is out there. I know it. 3 eggs, 3rd cup oil, got it done.
The third aisle of the grocery store.
Third
you have
aisle.
mastered it completely.
Oh, yeah. No, we used to stock our basement. And so, I said to him, I really want to learn to cook. And he took that very seriously. And he called his favorite restaurant in the city that he goes to every year on his birthday, although it's no longer around, Chanterelle in Tribeca. And he called a few different places. And he got in touch with the pastry chef of Chanterelle, Kate Zuckerman, and he said, I have this young guy who wants to, I actually don't even know what he said, but, I kind of imagine it to be a little bit crazy and say, I have a 12-year-old who wants to come work for you. What do you think? And
she said, you're insane.
Exactly. She said, you're insane. But shockingly, Chanterelle's done this for a few people. I've recently learned, I don't know if I was the youngest, but I've recently ran into people who are like, I started Chanterelle when I was 15. And I'm like, wait, is this a thing? Do they breed, children there?
They love that free labor.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started working there when you were 12. Were you working on the weekends?
Yeah.
What did they have you do?
So I'd work every Saturday from around 7 a.m. to around 3 p.m. Basically, we lived up in the Hudson Valley because when I was about 8, we moved up to Hudson Valley from Brooklyn. And my dad still to this day commutes down for his law office in the city. And now he can commute like 1 day a week, which is nice. But back then he was, back and forth a lot. And so I would actually take the train down. My mom would drop me off on the train, take the train down, and he'd pick me up on the other end. And on Friday nights, crash on his couch. And then Saturday morning, right into Chanterelle's kitchen. And, to this day, I think back about what they had me do, and I think, holy shit, I'd never let a 12-year-old do that in my kitchen.
Using knives, being near boiling water.
I don't remember them stopping me from doing anything. I mean, Kate might listen to the show and go, wait, what are you talking about? Jake never touched a knife. But, I remember I did a lot of chocolate work, which really blew me away there. I did a lot of kind of, basic chocolate work, scooping ganache and robing ganache. I did a lot of kind of pastry prep, if you will. Back then I thought I was like, oh my God, I'm doing everything. This is amazing. Now I'm like, okay, I was the pastry prep cook. Got it.
Yeah.
But, usually they had interns there too. So it'd be like me and an intern teamed up, chopping strawberries, counting out petit fours, making petit fours. It was a lot of counting to 120. So I assume that was how many covers we did, although it's been a long time.
So you were really thrown into the mix, and they were allowing you to do these repetitive things where you're building sort of this skills repertoire, right? You're in there once a week, but you're learning how to be part of a kitchen, and you are figuring out all the aspects, the hierarchy, the storage protocol, the technique that goes into this work. Did you immediately after Chanterelle say, pastry is for me? What was the next step after Chanterelle?
I think you kind of nailed it right there. I mean, for me, I remember saying, I don't know if I want to do pastry or savory, but I'm more comfortable baking at home with my mom than cooking with my dad at 12. So, because my dad would do some savory cooking, my mom would do baking more so. And, I kind of was just like, yeah, let me try it. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with, I guess, everything. I guess it's kind of like when you're learning a language from a young age, how much easier it is. It's kind of like learning the consistency, learning the language of the kitchen, as you just kind of put it, with the consistency factor. I mean, I wasn't bored by counting out 120 little white doilies to fill my petit fours with every single Saturday morning. Like, that's how I wanted to spend my Saturday morning. I totally get that I was an abnormal 12-year-old, but I fully enjoyed kind of like, all right, pâte de foie 1, 2, 3, over and over, and okay, in the next color pâte de foie, let's start again. And really kind of organizing it, and I just took a lot of pride in terms of like putting it into the fish box, labeling it, putting it upstairs on the line. And I still remember like the special feeling of putting away a finished product, especially bringing it upstairs to the FOH and like getting to hand it off as, wow, this is going to be in the dining room tonight. People are paying money for something I just touched. Like, it was kind of that weird moment. But yeah, I think I really left there going, oh my God, I love chocolate. And I was crazy enough I was there for about a year off and on. Like, sometimes it was every other Saturday. Sometimes I'd come in, like I'd have a week off school and I'd ask if I can come down for a couple days. And Kate generously invited me to a couple shows she went to, like the chocolate show, and let me go up on stage with her and kind of talk to the whole group. Yeah, I fell in love with chocolate work. And from there I thought, oh my God, I'm going to open a small chocolate company. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I was ambitious 13-year-old and thought, well, I'll just sell truffles to everyone I know, and hopefully it works out. And before I knew it, I had a few stores in the Hudson Valley that wanted to carry my product every week. And I used to just make chocolates out of my home and sell them.
In Rhinebeck?
Is in Rhinebeck, yeah.
You're making the truffles in your mom's house.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. So I used to make, my mom even very generously, we had a part of the kitchen with like a washer dryer, and she had it relocated to the basement because she designed the house. And we put a countertop in, just like a piece of plywood, and I, would have, chocolate work there. I remember like saving up every dollar I could until I could buy a fridge at Best Buy, and bought the cheapest fridge they had and threw it in the basement, made sure a half sheet tray fit in it, and that was it. I just made chocolates pretty much every single day after school.
I want to hear more about your family dynamic. Your mother is now a farmer.
Yeah.
She was an attorney.
Yeah.
Your father's an attorney.
Yeah.
Did your siblings think that it was a little bit odd that their brother was a professional chocolatier at 13 years old? Were you getting like teased in any way by your family, or did they think that it was cute, or did they see this as a real passion that they fully embraced your decisions?
I would say all of the above. So I have two brothers. My older brother is about a little over 9 years older than me. So by the time we were living up there, he was in college. But he was in college at Vassar, so he was close by. And so he'd stop by. If I remember correctly, he lovingly called my truffles duty balls, which, seemed about right for a brother who was, I guess at that time, about 22, graduating college. And, so he, both my brothers were incredibly supportive. I remember when my older brother was like getting, he was getting hit on at a bar, like maybe when he was like 24 in New York. And turns out the one he was getting hit on is the purchasing manager for David Burke's new shop that was opening up. So he gave her my card, and next thing I know, I'm getting a call that David Burke's shop wants to carry my chocolates in New York. Long story short, apparently I called for her a week later, and she had been let go. So maybe the flirting at bars wasn't the best way to bring new customers in.
Maybe not, yeah.
And I actually went to the shop and unfortunately saw a lot of expired products on the shelf. So I was like, all right, this isn't right now. But, I definitely saw that. I was like, wow, so my brother's even, when he's getting flirted at by bars, he's still supporting my endeavor. So that was very supportive. And my younger brother, who's 5 years younger than me, he definitely was always around. I'm sure, I'm trying to remember back, I'm sure he teased me or just thought the term duty balls was too funny to resist. But they were always extremely supportive, and my younger brother even helped a lot. But I think
put him to work.
Yeah, exactly. He definitely helped me work, and to this day, he helps at Gristmill whenever he's in town.
Oh, cool.
Both my brothers help a lot, actually, with Gristmill. My older brother runs our music selection and constantly keeps it up to date and checks in and comes by the restaurant and shows love and support. And my younger brother goes to school in L.A. Every time he's in town, he's working at the restaurant, whether he knows it or not. But I think that back then I got a lot of support from family and friends and everybody just kind of coming together to tell people about my chocolates. Around the holidays, I had tons of orders with just friends and family's businesses. They would buy them for all their employees or for their coworkers, or it really became this kind of friends and family company.
Who helped run the business portion of it?
So the business portion of it, I primarily ran. I don't think we ever really turned a profit. It was more of a, as long as I basically break even. Mainly because every time I did make a little profit, I'd go out and buy another piece of equipment. So to this day at Gristmill, we're actually using things that I bought for the Jakery 15 years ago. Or
you reinvested in
I
yourself.
reinvested,
there
exactly. There are certain containers that my cooks go, why do we have this container? And I go, don't worry about it. But I
bought that with my own money 15 years ago. Don't you dare break that container.
Exactly. I know it's a shitty piece of plastic, but that has love in it. All right?
It has a lot of sentimental
value. There's a lot
value.
of stories. I think that, it was just an incredible amount of support. We called it the Jakery, and my parents definitely helped with business stuff. I even remember, they're both attorneys, although my mom's became a farmer. I would even be in touch with my parents' accountant or this and that, just to make sure I was flying right below the radar, so that I'm not going too illegal. Although the Jakery did accept credit cards, which I was told was a huge mistake. IRS still hasn't come after me though, so I think we're okay.
That's good. You don't have to worry about them anymore. There's the IRS doesn't matter anymore. I heard
Exactly.
the president has said
They're
that
shutting it down.
The new president has said the IRS doesn't matter. So I want to, before we take a quick break, I want to ask about what the next step was. You're 15 years old. You've worked at a restaurant already in New York. You've started your own business. Did you go to culinary school? Did you go to a more traditional college? Did you just simply start working at a restaurant? What happened next?
So after I worked at Chanterelle and I went home to work on chocolate work, I decided I naturally had to go to Paris. So I would go to the chocolate show every year. I made connections at the show, and actually one of my favorite chocolate companies, Chocolate Weiss, was incredibly generous. They're a small family chocolate company, similar to Valrhona, very similar to Valrhona, but smaller, and some of their products better. Although I love Valrhona, don't worry. And they actually set up an internship for me for a month at a chocolate shop in Paris, and I flew out to Paris one summer during high school for a month, set up a place to stay with my French teacher in school, and I lived there for a month and worked at a chocolate shop, learned more about chocolate, came back home, and I went to work each summer of high school. I worked at Gramercy Tavern for 2 summers during high school. So 3-4 months at a time. Came back the following summer to work for another pastry chef. So first with Nicholas Morgenstern and then with Nancy Olson. Learned an incredible amount from both. It was kind of a really incredible experience to work for 2 different chefs at one restaurant. It's like you don't have to relearn the kitchen or the environment, but you get a whole other knowledge base to learn from, which, if anyone has that opportunity, kind of a special one. And then I went upstate and I worked a little bit at a restaurant upstate as the pastry chef. Kind of found it a little slow for me considering what I was used to in New York. And then I decided to go off to a liberal arts college. I went to Oberlin in Ohio for a semester. I thought, what the fuck, there's so much corn growing here, but there's no good restaurants. And I freaked out and went, I got to get back to a kitchen. Moved back home, went to NYU for 3 semesters and started working in catering while I was going to school. So I worked for Danny Meyer's catering company for a while. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm not paying any attention in class. All I do is think about catering. So after 2 years in college, I decided, wait a minute, am I really using my time well in terms of learning, or am I just kind of following the footsteps of everyone who goes to school? And I thought, you know what, I can always come back and go to college if I want to, if that's for me. But right now, I want to learn how to run a kitchen. I want to learn how to open my own place. So I left school, and I thought, if I really want to learn, I need to learn in the right environment. And I went to work. I went temporarily to Union Square Café. They just asked me to fill in for a few months. So I spent, maybe 6 months or so there, filling in and kind of holding things down for a little while. Made a lot of great connections. And, at this point, I already worked for 2 Danny Meyer companies. And then I went to Boston. First went to help my mom a little bit with starting up her farm, just a little, because she's a much better farmer than I am. And then I went out to Boston to learn bread for a year. Came back to New York, where I met my girlfriend working at Odo, and learned some gelato. And went back to Boston and was the pastry chef of Striptease and Rebelle. And really learned an amazing amount, getting to run my own department, getting to run the bread and pastry operations for 2 restaurants, one of which was a sandwich shop by day, and really get to do our own thing, learn from some amazing chefs, working for Tim Maslow and other chefs that were part of our team. Spent almost 2 years out there and decided, I either got to get more committed with this restaurant out here, or it's time for me to go back home. And I missed Brooklyn too much. That's where I wanted to live. And I actually said, I'm going to open an ice cream shop. Goodbye, guys. And I moved back to Brooklyn. And as I was working on the plans for an ice cream shop, at this point I had actually been on a road trip across the United States to go to 25 ice cream shops in 10 days. And we did it. And I thought, when I got back, wow, New York is way too seasonal. I'd love to open an ice cream shop, but first I felt like I needed more of a name behind myself. So I thought, you know what, let's start with a restaurant. I didn't think until now, wait a minute, maybe the other way around would have been a little bit easier. As something I know a lot about is ice cream, and something I know a little less about is just trying to do everything in a restaurant. But I thought, let's have some fun.
I'm going to stop you there, and we are going to talk about Gristmill when we come back from this break with Jake Novick-Finder on the line.
And this one's called Let's Not by Shadowbox. We'll be right back. New York chefs and restaurants are proud of the food they put on the table. And serving produce that comes from local, environmentally responsible farms is a way to leave an even better taste in everyone's mouth. So when shopping for your ingredients, look for the New York State Grown and Certified seal. It lets you know which food is grown right here in New York State, certifying the food that comes from local farms that meet a higher standard. You'll not only be serving local food, you'll be supporting local farmers. Learn more about the New York State Grown and Certified program at certified.ny.gov.
Welcome back to The Line. We're here with Jake Novick-Finder. He's the owner and chef of Gristmill located in Park Slope. Prior to opening that restaurant, he worked for the Union Square Hospitality Group in catering. He worked at Gramercy Tavern and Otto. He worked in Boston. When he was 13, he opened up his own truffle company, and at 12 years old, he worked pastry at a restaurant in Tribeca called Chanterelle that has since been shuttered. So he's 26 years old. He's been cooking for 14 years. Jake, how did you open up Gristmill at 26 years old? Did you feel like did age play any role in that? Did you feel like you were too young to open up a restaurant, or did you feel that you were ready to do it? Because I ask you that because 26 on paper seems young, but 14 years of restaurant experience seems an intense amount of time where I believe anyone would say you'd be ready to do it. People open up restaurants all the time with less experience. Does the age mean anything to you?
I would say no. It's something I'm conscious of just because I of course I know that I'm young to open a restaurant, and there were definitely times during construction where, middle-aged men are like, why the fuck are you bossing me around? Why are you telling me what to do? And I'm like, look, I work in restaurants, so if I'm the chef, if I'm the boss, I'm telling you what to do. I won't be obnoxious, but I want this restaurant done right. So I'd say there were times where people just really weren't expecting me to be the owner. We're really looking for okay, who's the boss right now? And I'd be like, oh, I'll show you who the boss is. Let's get started.
Where's your dad?
Yeah, exactly.
young man, where is your dad or mother? Who can we talk to who's in charge here?
Right, exactly. And, from a young age, actually, when someone would call in, the home and be like, can I speak to someone in charge? And I'd be like, speaking. Can I help you? I might be 8, but let's get this conversation going. I don't have much time. I don't think so. I think that I had a lot of training and experience in the kitchen. What I didn't have training experience for was construction and managing a construction team, and I ended up kind of managing much of our team, and that was a huge challenge, but one I was really excited for. In every kitchen I've worked in, I've kind of tried to learn, especially as I got older, learn as much of the what I needed to know as possible, and then be like, great, what can I learn about what you're doing over there? What can I learn about what he's doing over there? How can I absorb what that maintenance guy is doing, so that next time that fridge breaks, I'm the one who steps up and goes, I'll fix the fridge. Yeah, I got this. Shit, what does this part do to this part? Yeah, don't worry about it, guys. I got this. For me, I've always just loved Legos at a young age, and I feel like that kind of made my brain work in a certain way where it's like, I love putting pieces of the puzzle together. So opening a restaurant has been a really, really exciting and fun challenge, and I love every day of it, even if it's exhausting.
We're in a similar boat. We're both fairly young guys, and we have young restaurants as well. Mine is a lot younger than yours. For me, an important part of the process has been being able to lean on someone. My brother is my partner. I can trust him. We make every decision together. Who do you look for mentorship, both in the kitchen and also on the business side, and also from the forward-facing perspective? Because in New York City, a restaurant is now, for better or for worse, it's more than a restaurant. You have to brand yourself. You have to promote yourself in a specific avenue to differentiate yourself from other restaurants that are literally and figuratively on the same block as you, right? So how do you accomplish all those goals while still being involved in the kitchen? Who do you look to for support in those areas?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. We've had some front of house managers from the get-go that just kind of didn't work out with the team. It also was a little bit of an obstacle to kind of find that right person. I would say that when we opened the restaurant from the kitchen perspective, Craig Hutch, who's a close friend and was the CDC of our restaurant in Boston, of our flagship restaurant, Rebelle, he actually was opening his own restaurant. He took a little pause and said, hey, let me give you 6 months. And he came in, and actually this past Saturday was his last shift. And he had really helped me with kind of helping design the menu, but also giving me somebody who I could say, all right, I'm going to step away from the kitchen and go focus on the bar, go focus on the business side, or go focus on something else. And I know I have somebody who I've worked with long enough in the kitchen. As of the last couple days, he has moved on as he's refocusing on opening his restaurant in Connecticut. But I now have a team, albeit small, but and we are looking for cooks. But I do have a team that's really great and really supports me. And, I've really grown to, learn to trust people more than I have in the past. And my girlfriend, Maria, has really thrown herself in to be kind of our events marketing director and running the front of house. And, she's, the other half of me and the other half of the restaurant. And then I call him my uncle. He's my mom's closest friend. He's our CFO and primary investor, John. He really helps me run the business side. So I kind of have my whole friends and family dive in. I mean, my mom's always calling, what can I do to help? And she grows a lot of our food up in Rhinebeck. So I have like an in-house farmer. My dad's
Good
also
connection that
exactly
you're working there.
Exactly. And she comes down and maintains all of our plants in the restaurant. My older brother, again, does our music. My younger brother helps with everything from picking up Acme smoked fish for me on a Friday morning because I forgot to order it to, running around doing errands. And, my dad is our lawyer for everything, but he's also a partner and an investor and part of the team, as well as John helping run the front of house stuff. But I also just have a lot of friends and family who've really come together to say, hey, I would love to be a consultant one day. Can I use you as my free example? And I go, yeah.
Please do so.
Please do.
Did you say free? Did you say free and
free?
Restaurant in the same sentence?
Unpaid what?
Yeah, come on in. So it sounds like you have a incredible. Your restaurant is a family. You have this built-in network that has allowed you to open up a place to utilize your skills in order to present them in a specific way, because you can rely on all these other pieces that if you need to shift up and out, someone else can kind of slide in and help you out. It leads me to my next question, which is with Craig leaving the kitchen. Do you think that you're going to be finding yourself really diving back in to specifically focusing on food, and are you a little worried that it will take you away from other things that you've been working on outside of the kitchen?
No, I'm actually I feel like we've made a really concrete, solid formation and structure in the restaurant so that it allows me to, what I'm learning to do is to put more trust into everyone who works for me and who's worked for me since the beginning. We have a lead bartender who, when we back away and give him more responsibility, all I see is him organizing things that weren't organized before. And so I go, wow, okay, so I really just needed to step back and let people own their own area. My cooks, even starting yesterday, just started doing things they never would have done before with organization and helping receiving products and all kinds of things where I go, wait, why weren't you guys doing this the last 5 months? And they go, we're stepping up. And I go, took you 5 months? Come on, let's go, guys. And I really love them for that. But I actually feel like my team is a little smaller, but that kind of oddly made us stronger than ever. I really feel proud of where we're at and who we have, and we kind of shrunk down to the people that were most valuing what we're doing and most caring about what we're doing. I mean, Gristmill, as a close friend called it, is a modern American restaurant, and it's a modern family restaurant because we really are a family within the restaurant, but then my family and my friends really are involved to a huge capacity. And everything we do, from having a wood fire oven that we want to bring people in, warmth, working for Danny Meyer, everything even on a big scale was family, was hospitality. And we try to bring that within our own team. But a lot of it comes from me just like saying to cooks, hey, I want you to have more freedom. Work on this dish. These are the ideas so far. Cook it for me. Let's taste it. Let's talk together. Let's get everyone's opinion, because everyone's opinion matters. And to me, the worst thing you can do is tell someone, shut up, your opinion doesn't matter, because their opinion might be a whole lot closer to the guest's reaction than your own. It's easy to get caught up. So I'm actually, with less help in a way, more excited to kind of spread myself, but at the same time, give everybody a little bit more responsibility.
I want to ask about Gramercy and Danny Meyer and Union Square Hospitality Group. They are able to accomplish pretty tremendous things based on their size and based on the vision and leadership that the top managerial people there have, and that Danny has put into effect, and that trickles down to all the restaurants. People listening that have small businesses, you and I, how do we put those into effect? How do, beyond the, you explained all the wonderful ethical sourcing that you do, over 90% of your product comes locally. Besides the food front, how do we continue to do things responsibly and ethically from a perspective of being a small business owner within our communities? How do you do that? I know that you just recently opened, and that, the first 6 months are usually, we got to get the menu right. But how do now, moving into hopefully your second and your third and your fourth year, what are your kind of plans for re-emphasizing Gristmill as a true family neighborhood restaurant? And what does that mean for your guests and also for your staff?
I mean, I think that it really comes down to treating everybody like family, but taking that really wholeheartedly. One thing that they stress more than any other restaurant in the Danny Meyer world is it's not just your coworker, it's not just the guest. It's the guy who delivers linens. It's the guy who delivers your farm goods. It's the company that comes out to fix your refrigerator. And once you build that atmosphere where your cooks know that when the fridge guy walks in, you offer him a non-alcoholic drink when he walks in and maybe something a little stronger when he walks out, that it starts to create this culture whereby you really feel, wow, this is about bringing together people with the strongest personalities first, and their ability and their skills second. Yes, ability and skill is important, but you can teach anybody to do anything. It's really about having the people that are truly warm, truly hospitable. I'm flattered when we've had guests come in and talk about how different our service is than the rest of Brooklyn. And they're not saying it's stuffy. They're not saying it's even the most advanced wine knowledge in Brooklyn. They're saying that they feel like this is really their other home. And we have more regulars than I could have possibly expected. We're trying to get busier every day. Weekends are busy, weekdays are slow, and we're trying to get there. But we really feel like building this culture, building the stories. I really try to let my staff have their own projects. The bar is doing so many things right now, and I don't drink alcohol myself. My body doesn't enjoy it. And so getting as involved as I am with the bar program was a challenge, and now I love it. And we make shrubs in-house. We're making our own bitters, our own vermouths. Everything we do infusion-wise is in-house. And so with all these projects, each bartender has his own. One bartender's working on bitters, one bartender's working on vermouths, one bartender's working on shrubs. And it's kind of the same in the kitchen. They have their own pickle program, their own fermented dairy or fermented bread starter. A lot of the cooks have their own bread starters. So everybody having their own little almost like food plant to take care of really seems to work in terms of building this family environment where, someone might say, hey, can you take care of something with one of my bitters on my day off? But it becomes really like family. It's like, hey, can you take care of my guinea pig while I go away for the weekend? The guinea pig might be a bread starter, but it starts to build that eco-culture where everybody's proud of what the project they're working on is, and it doesn't become this competitive environment. And sometimes we're working on stuff that we don't even have a plan for yet, but we got in some really cool radishes, and why wouldn't we ferment them?
This is, I'll get you out of here on this last question. At this rate, on your 40th birthday, you'll have been in restaurants for several decades. So let's look to the future now that we've talked so much about your past and how you got here and all the jobs along the way. I'm curious, where do you see yourself at age 40? And what does that look like in terms of Gristmill, you personally, and your hopes for your future food endeavors?
Well, I would say my goal, my dream, what I love is, I don't believe in having gristmill 2, gristmill 3, gristmill 4, or even putting gristmills all over the world. I believe in, maintaining a certain amount of control. And so I would love to open more and more food businesses in Brooklyn, whether it be in Park Slope or other neighborhoods of Brooklyn that are close enough that I can, be at them. But having, an ice cream shop under the same brand and ideology of gristmill, from a sustainability, from a farm practice, from a culture and family. Having maybe a pasta shop, a sandwich shop, and having all the businesses really coincide. Maybe we have a bread bakery that also makes bread for the restaurant and the sandwich shop, and then we have an ice cream shop that does the ice cream at gristmill. At gristmill now, we make our own bread, we make our own ice cream, our own sorbet. I mean, everything is from the rawest form we possibly can. And so, to start, we're really excited for Christmas and New Year's, and then the New Year, and then after that, the opening for breakfast. And the idea being, if we can kind of use gristmill as a testing site for all of these things, whether it be, opening as a coffee shop, opening as sort of an ice cream shop by day, then when I'm 40, we have the ice cream shop, we have the coffee shop, we have the bread bakery, but they're all separated from each other. At a certain point, we don't have enough space on our little wooden table to make enough bread at gristmill. But my goal in the next year is to be selling our bread to people that, whether it's pre-order, just want to come in and buy a loaf to make really delicious sandwiches for their kids that week, to buy pints of ice cream because we make ice cream in-house, but to have, when I'm 40, each of them be their own business and each of them support each other and have strong managers that run each location so that I can, step back and go, oh, I'm going to just pop into the ice cream shop today and make some ice cream, and then tomorrow I'm going to go run expo at the restaurant. So I think that's my dream, that's my hope, and that's my love for gristmill.
Jake, thanks so much for being here. If you enjoyed today's show, please head over to Heritage Radio Network and consider making a donation to keep us going. Appreciate you all tuning in for this episode of The Line. Join us next Tuesday at 11 a.m. here on Heritage Radio.
Thank you, Eli.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we're really digging. It's called Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio. Every week, they travel the world to find the most fascinating stories about food, including children who harvest cod tongues after school in Norway and a detective who tracks down food thieves. And on Milk Street Radio, you can always find the unexpected. The comedian who ranks apples using an elaborate 100-point system, the secret history of grocery stores, and how to eat your way through Italy. They also interview the most beloved names in food like Jacques Pepin, Sola El-Waylly, Jose Andres, Jet Tila, Ina Garten, Nigella Lawson, and Padma Lakshmi. Plus, co-hosts Christopher Kimball and Sarah Moulton do live calls with listeners and answer their questions about ingredients, techniques, and culinary mysteries. Like, why roasting a leg of lamb made one caller's oven explode? Ever wonder why your bread won't rise or your souffle falls flat? Chris and Sarah have the answers. You'll also hear from a rotating cast of contributors, including Kenji Lopez-Alt, Cheryl Day, Dan Pashman from The Sporkful, and Alex Ainuz, a French guy cooking from YouTube. Take a listen at 177milkstreet.com/radio or just search your podcast app for Milk Street Radio.